Have you ever wondered how a funeral ritual for one dead man could transform into the most anticipated blood sport across an entire empire? It started in 264 BC beneath the open sky of the Forum Boreum. 3 pairs of men stepped into a makeshift arena. They weren't soldiers, they were slaves, trained for one purpose: to fight to the death. Not for glory, but to honor the dead. Decimus Junius Brutus Scaever had just buried his father. To mark this occasion, he staged what Roman historian Livy would later call the first recorded gladiatorial combat in Rome. This wasn't a public spectacle yet. It was a funeral rite, what Romans called a munus, a duty owed to the deceased. These fighters bled not for sport, but as a sacred offering. But here's where things get interesting. This private ritual, rooted in human sacrifice traditions, began to shift. In southern Italy, especially in cities like Capua, these bloody rites were already changing. The Samnites, Rome's former enemies, had long hosted warrior duels during feasts for the dead. Over time, ritual killing evolved into ritual combat. The death itself became less important than the struggle. Now, you're probably thinking, how did a private funeral ritual become state-sponsored entertainment? By the late 3rd century BC, these duels moved from funerals to festivals. They appeared in Rome's growing roster of ludi, games sanctioned by the Senate itself. The Senate would vote to fund them, making the games a matter of state policy, not private grief. Can you see what's happening here? By the end of the Republic, temporary wooden arenas gave way to massive stone amphitheaters. What began as a somber rite in a muddy forum had been absorbed into the Roman state, codified, scheduled, and publicly funded. The iron gate groaned open. Silence fell over the crowd. From the shadows, a lone figure emerged, barefoot, carrying nothing but a short blade. Across the sand, a cage door rose. A lion, ribs pressing against matted fur, stepped out into the sunlight, starved, alert, coiled with hunger. This was no duel. This was an execution staged for public thrill. By the 1st century CE, Roman arenas had become theaters of forced confrontations between man and wild beast. They called them venationes when staged as hunts, or damnatio ad bestias when used for executions. These spectacles blurred the line between punishment and entertainment. The condemned, criminals, prisoners of war, rebellious slaves, were thrown into the arena against lions, leopards, bears, often weakened by hunger to ensure a swift and violent end. But wait, there's more to this story. Generals like Pompey realized the political power of spectacle. He orchestrated shows where men were cast against animals in elaborate displays, scenes where blood offered both punishment and applause. Some were trained fighters, bestiari, forced or paid to battle wild animals for the crowd's amusement. These weren't fantasies. In Roman Britain, archaeologists unearthed the pelvis of a man, likely a gladiator, scarred by deep bite marks matching the jaw of a large feline. He had died locked in combat with a lion. Seneca recalled how some prisoners would kill themselves before their appointed spectacle, rather than suffer a death meant to entertain others. Their refusal was silent rebellion, a final act of control in a world designed to strip them of it. What would you do in their place? The water glistened under the Roman sun, calm for only a moment. Then drums thundered, war horns cut through the air. 2 full fleets surged toward each other across a man-made lake. Soldiers stood on decks, armed with spears and catapults. Below them, thousands cheered from stone bleachers. This wasn't war. This was entertainment. Rome called them Naumachiae, mock naval battles fought in carefully engineered basins dug by imperial order.
Julius Caesar staged the first in 46 BC near the Tiber. He had an artificial lake excavated to reenact a battle between Tyrrhene and Egyptian fleets. Real ships, real weapons, and real men. Condemned prisoners who fought with no hope of survival.
Augustus constructed an enormous basin in 2 BC, measuring 1,800 by 1,200 Roman feet. So vast, it required its own aqueduct to fill it. On those waters, 30 warships clashed, each manned by convicted criminals numbering in the thousands. The message was clear. Rome could command not just armies, but nature itself. In AD 52, Emperor Claudius drained the mountain lake and celebrated with the Naumachiae. The fighters greeted him with words etched into history. Morituri te salutant. Those who are about to die salute you. Whether scripted or spontaneous, they captured the raw fatalism of men sent to die for public amusement. Do you see what's happening here? Each Naumachiae was more than a performance. It was a demonstration of total control, of water, of men, of empire. By the Colosseum's grand opening in AD 80, executions were no longer merely punitive, they were theatrical. Emperors used the midday break between gladiator matches to stage mythological tortures. These weren't symbolic dramatizations, they were real deaths designed to mirror the agonies of legendary figures. Martial, the poet and eyewitness, recorded what he saw. He described an Orpheus figure entering the arena to enchant wild beasts with song. But unlike the myth, the arena's animals were uncharmed. They tore him apart. One of the most disturbing reenactments was the myth of Pasiphae, the Cretan queen cursed to lust after a bull. Roman crowds witnessed a condemned person thrown to a beast in a twisted imitation of her fate. Fire, too, played its role. The tunica molesta, a pitch-soaked garment, was fastened to the condemned and set ablaze. Sometimes this was framed as the death of Lucius Scaevola, the Roman hero who proved his loyalty by holding his hand in fire. The result was the same. Screams drowned beneath applause. Tertullian bitterly described how victims were burned alive, tied to posts, and mocked as actors in a play of torment. "We are mocked as kindling men," he wrote, pain masquerading as moral spectacle. That's the real question, isn't it? What does it say about a society when suffering becomes entertainment? These mythological tortures weren't about storytelling. They were control, wrapped in ritual. Rome didn't just kill, it made death an echo of divine punishment, giving the audience not justice, but a perverse form of catharsis. Rome's arenas turned ritual into policy, spectacle into statecraft. Blood on sand, water and flame forged a culture that measured power by the choreography of death. As Seneca wrote, "I come home more greedy, more ambitious, more self-indulgent, yes, even more cruel and inhuman, because I have been among human beings." So here's my question for you. Which spectacle reveals the darkest truth about human nature? The funeral duels, the starvation hunts, the naval battles, or the mythological executions? Drop your answer in the comments. If this made you think differently about ancient Rome, hit that like button and share this with someone who loves history. And subscribe. We're diving into more untold stories that'll make you question everything you thought you knew.